Okay, so this is Kit Brennan with Pitbull Politics, and I am introducing to you Steve Porter. We had technical difficulties, so I get to hear it again, but that's all right because I'm really interested because I heard Steve, he put out a video on a Rocks and Cows. If you don't know what Rocks and Cows is, it's a Facebook group from the people that are very peeved with the legislators and stuff in Minnesota. And if you could do me a favor, because I know we just did this, but would you please be so kind as to tell me the beginning of your family? You said your farm had been in the family for about 32 years.
Yeah, so back in 1990, I got into law enforcement. I was a young deputy, and I wanted to raise a family out in the country. I retired from law enforcement. I had almost 30 years in law enforcement as a deputy, a chief deputy, a sheriff, retired. But in 1990, I got my foot in law enforcement. But in 1992, I'm living out in the country in a trailer house, and I got a quarter of land, and I got a license to raise deer, and I bought some deer to have as basically a hobby. But my hobby farm morphed into a full-time business. And over the next 30 years, we selectively bred to the best bucks I could get my hand into. The business morphed into from a hobby into an entertainment business. Many of your viewers have probably seen my live whitetail deer display. I would travel across the country. That started in about 1996, 97. I've been out to Bismarck, North Dakota, Green Bay, Wisconsin, Little Rock, Arkansas, Sioux Falls, South Dakota, some places in Missouri, Minneapolis, St. Paul. I've been all over the country, hundreds and hundreds of sports shows with live trophy whitetail bucks. Well, fast forward, I'm selling breed stock. I started collecting doe urine and I'm selling doe urine all across the country. We got a handling facility. And recently, maybe 15 years ago, we have a big chunk of land fenced in, and we started offering hunts to people who could come out and actually hunt bucks that are out in my preserve that think they're wild, but I own them. So we have a hunting preserve, entertainment business, urine collection facility, selling breed stock. I'm retired from law enforcement, and my deer farm was thriving. But in order to have a thriving deer farm, I have to be enrolled in what's called a CWD monitoring program. And I have a certified herd from the USDA. It's a federal agency that oversees us. And they basically say if you monitor your herd and you send in all your brain stems off everything that dies, all of your lymph nodes, hair samples, have an inventory, tag all your animals, and if you send in all these brain stems and the deer live in close quarters, they socially groom, they eat out of the same feeders, all this stuff's going on. If you send in brain stems for 5 years and no CWD shows up, we're going to certify you in our program. And that gives me freedoms to move some deer around the country. The federal government says you don't have CWD. If you're killing off hunting through death, butchering, whatever natural causes, and you're testing 30% or 20% or 40% of your animals annually, you got a clean herd. But then the drumbeat starts, and it was faint at first. And so this started about 5 years ago with the Minnesota Deer Hunters Association. And I kind of smelled a rat with the Minnesota Deer Hunters Association because they started beating their drum that deer farms were evil. So I started looking at them pretty close, and I noticed something. I did investigations for years, so I know the law and I know how to dig and I know how to root out a problem, right?
Mm-hmm.
The executive director at the Minnesota Deer Hunters Association was a guy by the name of Craig Ingwall. Who was he? So I did some research. Craig Ingwall was an attorney for the DNR.
Nothing good comes when an attorney gets involved.
So he becomes the executive director and kind of hijacks the club. And so he starts a drumbeat against deer farms and starts doing all this stuff. So I'm exposing him online. If I got a problem, what do I do? If I put light on the problem, then the evil doesn't like being in the light. So when you expose it and you talk about it and you make it available to the public, they don't like it. They like to work in the shadows, these people.
Well, I
So
want to interrupt you for a second because wasn't chronic wasting disease their big scare tactic? That like they made it sound like y'all were the ones causing it. or at
Right.
least spreading it.
Right. So what they're doing is they'd always leave out key details. They if a deer farm popped up with CWD, they would say, well, that's a smoking gun. Deer farms are causing CWD, but CWD itself doesn't self-combust. It has to be brought in or it naturally occurs on the landscape. Okay. So they would say, oh, a deer farm got it. And they'd go to the media and report that deer farm got it. And they brought it there and now it's going to impact the wild deer. But in 99.9% of the cases, they left out what was called an epidemiology report. So, for example, many of these cases, a deer farm did get CWD, but how did it get there? What's the epidemiology report say by the feds? Well, in one case, it was a taxidermy practice in Minnesota. The guy had deer, but he was a taxidermist and he imported a deer head from the heart of Wisconsin's CWD area to do taxidermy work. He brought over a buck that was infected to mount. And when he fleshed out the cape, the meat was being fed to his cats, and then his cats would go out into the deer pens and poop all over.
Yep.
His deer caught CWD. So was it the deer farm that was evil? Or was it a DNR managed taxidermy program? Well, the DNR didn't want to talk about their taxidermy licensing program of bringing in bucks from Wisconsin. They didn't want to talk about that, blame the deer farm. So they'd go on the radio and blast, start the drumbeat louder, deer farms are bad, but they'd ignore the epidemiology report. In another case, there was a dumping ground. People would come back from out west, bringing back elk and mule deer, and they would dump them on a piece of land. Well, that had been going on for about 20 years. A guy comes by, fences the land in, and puts deer out there. Well, there's bones all over out there that he
Sure.
didn't know about. And so then he ends up with CWD, and they run to the media and the St. Paul Pioneer Press or Star Tribune or whichever ones. They say, oh, deer farms are spreading CWD. Well, the epidemiology report said, where did it come from? And they say it wasn't brought in from another farm. They do trace backs. When I have an inventory on my farm, I have to log down where each deer was purchased. And all of these other farms are in a CWD program without CWD. So it didn't come from any of those farms because they're testing and killing off animals and sending in brain stems. But the epidemiology report then said on that farm, it was most likely on the soil, brought in from a Western state and dumped because that's the testimony. And there was so many bones found out there where he'd buried under the ground when he started disking with people driving down a ditch dump and dropping deer carcasses off. So all these epidemiology reports were pointing to an outside source other than the deer farm. Okay.
When I first saw your video, it was with this comment. I hunt zone 604. You must bring any adult deer you shoot in to be tested. I asked the 4 employees doing nothing when I got there how many deer tested positive the year before. None. I said, so why are we still a CWD zone? He said, the rules state the zone must go 3 years without a positive test. Then said they had one deer test positive the year before, and it was found dead in the woods up by Merrifield. I said, wait, you're talking about a deer they found up there 6 years ago that started this whole thing, right? Oh, no. It was a different deer. What a coincidence. A dead deer found in the woods in the same place with the same disease 3 years apart and nothing else in between. Millions upon millions of dollars have been spent to maintain these zones, and to what end? I asked the guy. So the way I understand it, this CWD comes from the soil. How do you hope to contain it by slaughtering deer with multi-limits and testing? He wiggled like I'd set his pants on fire. Pure BS, money laundering. They all need to be fired. This is the same story that they're trying to pass on to you guys.
Correct. And it even gets more insidious because they're they're calling us low-hanging fruit. We're easy to go after. We're just small. There's not a lot of us, and they can violate our rights up one side and down the other. And so I've caught them in so many lies. I've gotten several of these people fired, and they don't like it. So now they're fighting CWD. And how does this pertain to the listeners who are not deer farmers? Their approach is try to kill their way out of it. However, the state of Wisconsin has had over 10,000 cases of CWD. And if you look on a They keep track of zip codes. When you buy a license at I think it's a federal agency, I saw the map. And if you buy a license in Wisconsin and you go hunt the endemic areas of Richland, Dane, Iowa, and Sauk counties, where it's a higher than 50% prevalence rate of CWD, and if you buy a license to hunt in those areas, they have your zip code. And they print a map of where everybody came from all over the US to hunt in those four counties. And guess what? There's dots all over the United States where people are taking deer from those counties back to their home areas in Florida, California, Wyoming. And they're shooting deer, registering deer, and taking them back. Well, they can't take maybe the spinal cord or something and the brainstem. Okay, but they take the bones and the meat, and then they go home and they feed their dog, left the bones and the meat, and they feed their cats, and the cats and dogs go out in the woods and they poop in the grass, and then the grass grows up rich and green with prions, and then a deer comes by and eats that vegetation. It's proven, and they can contract CWD. So we have a problem.
Yes.
Yet they want to shut me down. That's the video you saw. So they come after us and they say, wink, wink, nod, nod. It's CWD. We want to control it. They ignore the fact that I have a CWD monitored certified herd registered with the USDA. And they say, well, what if you have CWD? We want you to double fence. So put up a $200,000 fence, Steve, and then you can keep raising deer. But they're saying the Democrats, MDHA, the DNR, they're all in bed together, and they say, we want you to keep raising deer. That's fine. You can raise deer. You just can't make very much money, and we're going to double your expenses, quadruple your expenses, and really limit how you can make money. So we're going to pass a bunch of laws against you. So if I put up a $200,000 fence, I can keep raising deer. But they've already killed off my entertainment business that I did for 25 years, traveling around with live whitetail bucks. That business is dead. So I'm out maybe $75,000 a year, and income's just gone, and there's nobody feeling bad or apologizing. We just killed off that part of your business through legislation. So and rulemaking process. So anyway, here we are, fast forward. Their strategy is for small business, cripple them through legislation, increase expenses, decrease income, and they all go away. So we decided at some point when this steady onslaught was going on, we decided I don't mind being vocal. I have 60 some thousand followers on my Facebook page. I don't mind being vocal. People say, "Oh, Steve, he's too loud online." You're not going to get any business. You're going to chase away customers. The louder I get online, the more my phone rings. I do get business because people are fed up. People are fed up.
Yes.
I get good business by doing this. But anyway, so we decided we're going to have to take legal action. So how do I find an attorney that's worth anything? That's a big deal. If you look online, they all tell you they're the best, but they're probably not. So my years of law enforcement told me the most critical step is finding the right attorney. And which court are we going to go into? I have no desire to sue anybody in Minnesota court where it's stacked full of liberal judges.
Exactly.
My constitutional rights are violated. It's a federal constitutional rights that they violated. And remind me, and I'll explain to you what those are in just a minute, what they violated. And we'll get into the details, the nuts and bolts of what they did. But I went in and spoke to my prosecuting attorney that I'd worked with in law enforcement for many, many years. And I told him, I said, hey, I want you to fire up your law computer, do me half an hour of research, and I'll pay you as an attorney. But I want you to tell me which attorney has successfully sued the state of Minnesota the most and won in federal court. I want to know who has the largest track record of success suing the state of Minnesota in federal court. And he searched for half an hour and he turns it around in his chair and he says his name is Eric Cardall. Thank you very much. I paid him and out the door I went. We got a hold of Eric Cardall. He said he'd take our case, and he says, I don't take losing cases. I take winning cases, and I don't gamble. You gamble. So what does that mean? He wants $200,000 to start our lawsuit. And we said, well, is it going to be more than that? I mean, is this going to have $1 million price tag when we're done? Because we can't afford it. We're just a lot of our deer farmers are retired dairy farmers or
Sure.
They're turkey farmers. They have acreage and they just wanted alternative livestock. And again, by Minnesota statute, my deer are livestock. Okay, so that's an important legal thing there. That means they're personal property. So for the rest of this conversation, we don't have to call my deer deer anymore. We can call them cows. For legal terms, they're livestock. Okay, but I am raising deer, but for legal terms, I'm raising livestock. So Eric Cardahl just says he'll take our case. We have to do a lot of fundraising. We have to dig deep in our own pockets. We have to take a break from our lives, come up with money that we don't have to defend our constitutional rights. Now, listen, you and I have constitutional rights that were given to us. I didn't have to pay for them, but they were paid for. Your constitutional rights were paid for in blood
Yes.
by your forefathers. Your forefathers, somewhere in your family tree, there was a young boy, maybe 18 years old or 16, and he died in a battlefield fighting for our United States Constitution, fighting for our country and our rights. So if those rights were given to us, I was naive and I thought, well, they were defended. The courts defend those rights and our lawmakers defend those rights. So for 30 years while working in law enforcement, I would tell people, hey, these are the laws. We need to enforce them. Our legislatures are wise people. They got our best interest at heart. And we just gotta go along with what they pass and legislate. And I was naive. I actually thought they were good people. Then I retire and I see what they're doing to farmers, and I realized if they were good, they're not anymore. They're evil at their heart, passing laws to run people out of business. So we hired an attorney, but what is it that the state of Minnesota did that would violate my constitutional rights? What is it that they did? Well, they passed a law that says I can't sell my farm. My farm, I can give it to my son, but then my farm must die after my son's done with it. So they scheduled my farm for extinction. And that's called, what is that called? That's called a regulatory taking. And
Yes.
our Constitution says that a state or government, they can claim eminent domain and they can take your stuff. They can. Well, what would be an example? They said they're going to put an interstate through your house. They can claim eminent domain and take your house. But then they have to give you something called due process. And that means they got to pay you for it. So if they're going to put an interstate through your house and wipe out your business, they have to make you whole again with due process, buy you a new house, get you set back up, and then they can put their interstate in. So in our case, they just said, well, we're going to take your business, we're going to steal it from you through legislation. You can't sell it. So even though you've got a 32-year-old farm that's making you money, it has to die now. We got to kill off your farm, and we're not going to give you due process. No due process, no payment. You're done. Sucks to be you. Okay, that's a problem.
Yeah, huge
Okay,
problem.
so then they passed a law that says there will be no more deer farm licenses in Minnesota. What does that mean? That means that if I want to sell breed stock to other people,
Yep.
nobody can get a license to buy deer. So all of my does with a stroke of Wallace's pen are now worthless. So wink, wink, nod, nod. Steve, you can keep raising deer. We want you to raise deer. We're just worried about disease, but you can't sell any deer in Minnesota and you can't sell your farm. Your son can take your farm one time if he's a blood relative, but it has to die when he's done. Well, none of my sons are excited to take over a business that they must kill and they'll never get a retirement off of. So they passed these laws, and it's called a regulatory taking, and they've avoided us due process, right? And there's more to it than that. This exclusionary fencing thing that they're claiming I have to put up a $200,000 fence. I've caught them in lies, and I videotape things, and okay, so let's pretend that it's good. Let's just say What the DNR is doing is good, and I'll play devil's advocate. And all they're doing is worrying about disease. Everybody wants a good, healthy deer herd. Everybody wants healthy animals. And Steve, you don't want to spread disease. So they made a law that that they want to keep things disease free, and they're just working to keep it disease free. Okay, that sounds good. I like that. So they took my livestock under Minnesota statute. Deer are livestock, and all of their byproducts are agricultural products. They took my deer from the Board of Animal Health, administering, overseeing us, and they said, we're going to turn you over to the DNR, and they're going to manage you. So I went, my farm license went from the Board of Animal Health to a DNR agency. So now in Minnesota, the Department of Natural Resources is overseeing and regulating livestock. So the Board of Animal Health was doing all the paperwork, keeping track of our inventories, reconciling them, keeping track of our movement forms. If I sold a deer, where did it come from? Where did it go? And if there was ever a CWD flare up, they could go to every farm I bought from and trace it right back to its origin with an epidemiology report. And they're just controlling disease. Board of Animal Health did a good job. What was their budget? The Board of Animal Health had a budget of about $600,000 a year to oversee and manage about 700 deer farms. Well, after the drumbeat started by the Minnesota Deer Hunters Association, their attorney, DNR attorney Craig Ingwall at the helm, and the onslaught of bad press and laws, they've squished us down to about 100 deer farms. So then they say, we're going to turn these remaining 100 farms down after we've been legislatively attacking them. We're going to turn them over to the DNR and let them just iron fist them right into the ground. So the DNR says, yeah, we'll do it. We'll really ride these guys hard, encourage them to get out, because we'll ding them, we'll ding them, we'll
Nickel and
ding them,
dime.
and then we'll take their license away. And once they don't have a license, they can't farm. And then they even put it in statute that says if I lose my license, the DNR commissioner can come onto my property and kill all my animals.
Oh my
So,
God.
so we're on the fast track heading towards extinction. But the DNR said we'll do it, but we're going to need to get paid. And we're not going to do it for $600,000 like the Board of Animal Health did. Board of Animal Health said they'd do it for $600,000. DNR said Bob Meyer likes money, and he says we'll do it for $4 million a year. So the Democrats in the Twin Cities says, yes, we'll give you $4 million a year to manage the paperwork of 100 deer farms. And we screamed and hollered and said, hey, you're killing us off. Why don't you just buy us out? Just buy us out. They said, there's no money for that. We can't do that. There's no way we can. But we can give the DNR $4 million a year annually to manage you 100 guys. Well, it came out to about, I think it was about $1,200 per deer that the DNR got for management annually. So when the game warden comes to my farm and I've got 100 deer on my farm and he walks around and checks my fence, he earned the DNR 100 deer times, let's say it was 1,200. He earned the DNR 120 grand to come out here and try to drive me into the ground. Okay. But there's no money. There's no money to buy us out, but there's money to regulate us to death.
Yep.
When I was in law enforcement, there was a sheepdog that was alive and well in me. And I like to look out for people who had been, let's say, a victim of a sexual assault or a burglary or a robbery or a crime of some sort. And so when I seen this happening to my friends in the deer industry, it really ticked me off. And I want to help protect them and make them whole. So we get the lawsuit going. We're rolling ahead. And the DNR doesn't know it's coming. And they passed a whole bunch more laws the last session against us. Lawsuit was filed shortly thereafter. And we're kind of waiting for it to play out. What other laws did they pass? They passed a law that a game warden can come onto my farm and do the inspection. Well, I would have no issue if the Board of Animal Health wants to come onto my farm and look at the health of my animals and do their inspection. I get it. I got a license. I'm going to have an inspection. But the Board of Animal Health person doesn't have powers of arrest. They don't have a gun, a camera, a taser, handcuffs, mace. And so now they're sending an officer out. And as soon as you send an officer out, now we've opened up a whole new can of worms
Yes, we have.
because I have what? Constitutional rights. And everybody has the right to remain silent. You cannot coerce somebody. Our Constitution says that no state can compel any of its citizens to testify against themselves. So you can't compel them, you can't threaten them.
Just that, but Steve, it sounds like a legal search and seizure. They're out looking for a problem that doesn't exist so they can charge you with something.
Correct.
It's entrapment.
Cameras are rolling. So if I had let's say I had a burning barrel and I was burning garbage and it was an infraction because you can't have a burning barrel. They're videotaping it. So I asked the game warden when he came the first time with cameras rolling, I said, do I have a right to tell you no? You can't come on my property. He said, you do. You can tell me no, but then we're going to revoke your license and we're going to kill off your deer. So I have to forfeit my right to remain silent and I have to forfeit my right to demand a search warrant, or you take my license. Yep. Okay. And I said, does the plain view doctrine apply today? And he started explaining to me what the plain view doctrine was. And I said, I fully understand what the plain view doctrine is better than you do. I didn't ask you what it was. I asked you if it applies today. He said, well, yes, it does. So the plain view doctrine is if you have a legal right to stand where you're standing as an officer, anything you see is fair game for criminal prosecution. Okay, so it's explained this way, okay? If I got word that somebody in town, they have a 4-foot picket fence and they're growing a meth lab, okay? They have a meth lab. They're not growing pot, they have a meth lab. And somebody told me he is a meth lab, but the person doesn't want to get involved and they won't let sign on the dotted line, let me get a search warrant. So I know the guys at work. I go up to his house, I open his little picket fence with a hook, a thumb hook, and I walk down his sidewalk and I knock on his door, but I know he's gone. I knock on the door, and when I'm there, I can smell chemical and I see through the corner of the window, I see what looks like a meth lab through the shade, and I leave and I go back and get a search warrant. I can get a search warrant, but guess what? It's no good. Why is that search warrant no good? Because I didn't have a legal right to go stand on his steps
Yep.
and open his little curtilage fence, thumb hook, walk down there because I want to be nosy. So the search warrant would get signed by a judge, but then when we go to trial, I'm going to lose the search warrant, and all evidence obtained in the search warrant would be fruit of the poisonous tree, and the guy would get off. So, same scenario now. That is the plain view doctrine. You got to have a legal right to stand where you stand when you observe the infraction and get a search warrant or whatever. Well, the game wardens want to come on my farm saying he has a license. We're going to film all his stuff. And when we leave, we're going to write tickets everywhere. Okay. Well, I asked him if the plain view doctrine applies. He said it does. Well, then you're coming on my farm as an officer because it only applies to officers. And if you're an officer, I have the right to tell you to get a search warrant.
Yep.
But no, I don't. And if I say, no, you can't come on my farm, they're going to take my license away and kill my deer, which is a constitutional violation because no state can compel any of its citizens to testify against themselves. You can't threaten them. And they're threatening me to take my license if I don't talk to cops. Okay, now people say, well, if you got nothing to hide, just let them on your property. Guess what? My forefathers fought and bled out on a battlefield to give me these rights. If I respect my forefathers and their life that they sacrificed, then I have to exercise these rights. And that I have nothing to hide, but I'm not giving up my rights or my forefathers died in vain.
Your
Okay,
privacy.
right. So I'm not going to forfeit my rights. So now let's go back to this meth lab scenario. Guy tells me he's got a meth lab and I want to go in there, but I can't just walk up and open his little gate and walk in and peek in his window because the search warrant would be kicked. So I just tuck it away in my brain. And about 2 weeks later, the guy's wife is divorcing him and she wants me to serve him papers, divorce papers. I got to go hand him a set of papers. And I go to the same gate and I open the gate. I walk down the same sidewalk, but I'm holding a set of divorce papers. I have legal service to render. I walk up to the door. He's not home. I knock on the door to serve papers. And when I look, I can smell chemical and I can see a meth lab through the same curtain. Now I can go back and I can get a search warrant. And I had a legal right to stand where I was standing. And the search warrant's righteous. And all the evidence is not fruit of the poisonous tree. It's good fruit, good evidence, and you get a conviction. So these game wardens want to come on my property and film everything because I have a deer farm. Well, guess what? Sex offenders who molest children have the right to remain silent.
Yep.
Sex offenders who molest children have the right to say, no, I want you to get a search warrant. But deer farmers in Minnesota, under the Tim Walz regime, they don't have a right to ask for a search warrant and they don't have the right to remain silent. So here we are. We've got our lawsuit filed and we are waiting for a decision in District 8 federal court. And about 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, we heard from the court that they would have a decision to us within 45 to 60 days. So we're waiting. It's right around the corner. But the DNR is in a hurry. And they're like, we got to hurry up and get this stuff done. These guys should have had their exclusionary fencing up. They didn't do it. Well, the statute's ambiguous at best. It's asking for exclusionary fencing. And they're saying, well, it's got to be an 8-foot netting fence to the tune of 200 grand, or you can use a nylon shade cloth. Put that up for like 60 or 72 inches. It's like a big sail. When the wind
Yep.
picks up, it might blow your fence over. Your animals will escape, and then we'll write you another ticket. Your fence can't hold this big sail. The deer will eat the synthetic material off the fence. They'll get a knot in their
Sick.
stomach and die.
Yep.
You can use shade cloth and your deer, and then we come back in a year and they've eaten some of it and poked holes through it with their antlers. Then we'll write you tickets because there's holes in it. You can put up $20,000 worth of shade cloth and we'll ding you next year when it's falling apart. Or you can go with a 4-inch by 2-inch low tensile, soft, malleable netting. You could put that up about a foot away from your fence. My bucks think that's a chew toy. They rub on it with their antlers. They roll it up in a ball. I've tried it and I got little pieces of wire spread out from one end of my pasture to the other. They rip it up. And so the DNR says you can use that. Well, that wouldn't make it 6 months and it'd be destroyed. So then the other thing they say is you can put up 5 wires, electric wires with an alarm, but not to exceed more than 9 inches apart. 5 wires. Okay. And it's got to be between 2 and 3 feet away from your existing 8-foot fence. And the DNR says, well, we're just trying to control disease. That's all we want to do is control disease. And again, we're in a USDA certified program. We don't have disease. They don't care about disease. I can sell doe urine all over the state out of these same does. People can pour it in the woods on scrapes. I don't have CWD. So we're going to put up a fence to keep them from touching noses, but I can sell hundreds of gallons of urine all over the state. It doesn't make any sense. And the
None.
rainwater can come through my pen and wash the urine and feces out of my pen into the little coulees, and it can go downstream where the wild deer drink it. That would be fine, but we don't want them to touch nose. So it's wink, wink, nod, nod. We're going to take away your income, increase your expenses. Got nothing to do with disease. We just want you guys done. So I started saying earlier, and I want to go back to this. I said, let's say the DNR just wants to control disease and they're not crooked and they're honest and they're just trying. We all want healthy deer and they're just trying to do a good thing. Let's just say that, okay? I don't believe that for 1 minute, but let's say it's true. So the DNR is doing a good thing, we're going to say, and they turned our livestock industry over to the DNR. There is something in the Constitution that talks about equal protection under the law, right? So I
Yep.
should get equal protection. So now because CWD's never gone to a human, and I don't have CWD, I fully expect that turkey farms in Minnesota who have Asian bird flu, they need to be turned over to the DNR. And there needs to be double fencing of many different types and maybe a sky net over the top because Asian bird flu is going to fox and geese and oh, it's going to dairy cows. Asian bird flu
Yes.
is going to cows. So now we got to turn over the cattle industry to the DNR. Let's turn all the beef over to them and let's make all the cattle farms put up double fence. And we shouldn't have raccoons coming in and eating out of the cow feeders because they could get Asian bird flu and take it back to their raccoon buddies and spread it. And it can go to people. So since it can go to people and people are dying from Asian bird flu, the DNR needs to do what? They need to have an embargo on cheese and milk and eggs and butter and leather, probably.
Yeah.
We need to turn it all over because that's what they're doing into the Minnesota deer farmers industry. So my point is that would be ludicrous what I just said. It would be totally ludicrous, but that's exactly what they've done to us. And all the big farmers, they're tone deaf. They don't hear it.
Yep.
They don't hear it. They don't care. It's like, well, it's just deer farmers. I mean, who, whatever. We don't care. But a little infraction on our constitutional right is a big deal because it's just a start and they don't stop. There's no end in sight of where they're going to stop. So now, fast forward, I've said a lot. I've covered a lot of ground that I could go on for
Yep.
5 hours. Okay.
That's okay. Because
So
I like where you're heading because we're going to talk about it.
yeah. So what happens with our lawsuit? If we win, what if the district court, District 8, what if they agree with us? And they say all these laws are unconstitutional. And we got an injunction. We stopped them. Now what happens? Deer farmers all across our state killed off all of their animals. Elk farmers killed off all their
Yes, they
animals.
did.
I have friends who sold their house. They hate Minnesota. They moved to Wisconsin and their business is destroyed. Their animals are dead. Their house has sold because the DNR says you are going to put up a fence according to our plans with the way we say it needs to be up. But the DNR is saying we can't help the laws that legislators pass. I mean, it was the legislators. Blame them if you don't like it. But wait a minute. It was the DNR in there lobbying for it.
Yep.
They were lobbying for these laws. Now, when the legislature passes it, then they blame them. But who was pushing them? Minnesota Deer Hunters Association, an outdoor group that's been hijacked by the far left, in my very strong opinion, at the top. They were lobbying for it. And they wanted these laws passed against agriculture. It doesn't even make any sense why they would stick their nose in it, but they did. So now, what happens if we win? How do we make all the damages right in Minnesota
How do you make everybody whole?
and give them due process?
Yes.
So our attorney in our first hearing asked the DNR attorney, Eric Cardall, turned to the DNR attorney, Attorney General's office guy, in front of the judge. No, it was the judge that asked. The judge asked the DNR attorney. He said, is it the state's intention to legislate these guys to death? And the attorney said, yes, Your Honor, it is. And then our attorney, Eric Cardall, says, I would like to thank my colleague for being honest. And he laughed. He couldn't believe that he admitted it on
Believe it
record.
either.
And he says, I want to thank him for being honest. And he says, Your Honor, we've got a problem because the state of Minnesota could have repealed the statute that says deer on Steve's farm or everybody else's farm, those deer are no longer livestock. The deer that Steve has, we're going to classify them not as livestock, but as wild animals. That's what we're going to do. We're repealing that statute. And if they would have repealed the statute, what would they have had to do? They would have had to give us due process, which means you got to pay us. You just took our animals. And he said, but they don't want to give them due process, so they want to legislate them to death. And it's actually, he didn't say this, but it is, it's theft. The Minnesota Democrats are committing theft of farms. That's what they're doing.
Yes, they're stealing land, they're stealing livestock, they're stealing livelihoods.
Correct. Correct. And so if I lost my farm, I enjoy the fight. This fight that I'm in, this is a hoot. I enjoy it. I go online, I do rants. I got Craig Ingwall fired. It was a hoot. It was easy. Okay? I got him fired from MDHA. And they hired a new guy, Jared, that I believe is just as bad, as far left environmentalist as you've ever seen, as I've ever seen. So Walt said to Craig Ingwall, he said, "Don't worry, they fired you. You quit before they could fire you. You resigned. I have a job for you." And they took Craig Ingwall and
Yep.
they put him as an attorney on the board of soil and water to be in charge of nutrient runoff, to come up with rules and policies for farmers and golf courses who use fertilizer.
There you go.
Awesome. This is fantastic. So Lou Cornicelli was the big game manager in Minnesota. Lying Lou. I got him fired. It was a hoot. It was easy. How did I get him fired? They love their guys. They don't like me, but it was easy. And I got so much more stuff planned for the Minnesota DNR. I just chuckle because these ideas that come to me, they're easier than going after someone who hurt a kid. These ideas, I mean, the DNR is easier because they're dumber than a sex offender, okay? So Lou Cornicelli, what did he do? He wrote a policy. And it was something along the lines of what you said earlier. If they have a CWD case and it's within so many miles, it becomes a CWD zone.
Yes.
That zone will be subject to higher kills. We're going to kill and do more testing, and it's going to basically destroy the deer herd in that area. Your land values are going to plummet because it's no longer good hunting land. Your hunting camps are going to get broken up, and their state policy is devastating to rural economies, okay? Because they're killing off all the deer in the name of looking for CWD. But the policy that Lou wrote says if you have a CWD positive within so many miles of wherever you are, it's a 15-mile or 10-mile zone, and we're killing everything as much as we can. We're going to have extra tags, extra sharpshooters. We're going to pay for it. Helicopter hunting. We're getting rid of all these deer, and we're going to kill this deer into this disease into submission. So then I find out that Rick Hansen is a state rep who's pushing for my farm destruction. And Rick Hansen is a state rep that is in love with Obama and Biden and Kamala, and he's as far left as you can get. But he's got a piece of hunting land.
It's coming.
Oh wow. There was a CWD within about 3 miles of your land. And lo and behold, it's not in a kill zone. So lying Lou Cornicelli alters and deviates from the state mandated plan that he came up with, and he doesn't put his buddy's land in a kill zone. So I do a video and I expose it. And I said, Lou Cornicelli with the DNR is offering favors to his Democrat state rep friend. And here's the land, and here they didn't do it. They didn't put it in there. And here's the policy, and here's what it says. And the coordinator of the program is giving favors to keep the land value up for a state rep. Okay, so I jack up Lou Cornicelli hard at like 4 o'clock on this video, and it gets like a lot of views in the next 24 hours, and people are mad. The next morning, a guy calls me by the name of Jason Sickler from Southwest Minnesota, and he goes, "Steve, I was so mad because all my deer have been killed off. I emailed Lou Cornicelli and said, what the hell is going on?" Lou emails him back and says, "I don't know what you're talking about, but I understand Steve Porter must have done another video. I don't watch his videos, but I know he did one because I'm receiving death threats." And that was about it. Okay. Well, in Minnesota, we have something called Minnesota data privacy. You just told a citizen of the public that I caused you to get a death threat? You attached my name to you being the cause of you getting a death threat? So I did a data request of Lying Lou's email from 4 o'clock when I put the video out till 8:10 the next morning when Jason got his email. And I said, I want to see all of his emails, every one of them, and they have to send them to me. I get all of his emails, and guess what?
Not a
There's
threat.
no death threats.
Not a threat.
No threats. So he lied to the public and said I caused him to get a death threat when he didn't even get one. So then I write a letter of complaint and I said he violated Minnesota data privacy. You guys didn't send me a police report that he reported saying he got death threats. There is no investigation. I asked for it. There is no investigation. Here's the email that says he got death threats, which he didn't report, and they don't exist in his email. He's lying to the public about me. And it took a few months, but Lou's now a teacher in Florida. He left. Okay.
Okay.
So our mothers teach us not to lie when we're young, and that's a good rule to live
It
by.
is a very good rule.
But it's not a good rule for the Minnesota DNR. They will lie up one side and down the other. Not all, not all, not all, but most of them lie. Okay, so Lou, we got rid of Lou. Now I got this game warden that comes out to last May. We met with a guy by the name of Mike Oler, head of the deer division in the DNR. Mike, I think, was a pretty good guy. I think he was a patriot. He tried, but he was getting marching orders. And Mike said, there's only 4 methods of fencing. That's all you guys can do. That's it. If you don't do these 4 methods, that's it. We're going to ding you, notice a violation, civil fine, and then when you don't pay your fine and we don't get it taken care of, we're going to move towards taking your license. And once you don't have a license, statute says we get to come and kill all your deer. And I said, okay, so 5 strands of hot wire? Yep. And what happens if my wire sags? I got to put up 1.75 miles of 5 strands of hot wire.
Unbelievable.
Guys come and check it, and it's 10 inches apart, not 9. You could get a ticket. Okay. And what if a tree falls on it or a branch or something
Sure.
happens and it's a foot low? Yeah, you can get a ticket. And you get enough tickets, then we come take your license and we come kill all your deer. I said, so why would I want to put up 5 strands of wire when I know you're just looking to find a violation all the time?
Mm-hmm.
And we can only put up those 4. Yep. And I said, the statute doesn't say those 4 methods, Mike. The statute doesn't say that. The Chevron and deference case at the federal level lawsuit just said about 6 months to a year ago, 3-letter agencies cannot come up with rules. The only person that has the authority to make laws are duly elected legislators. And 3-letter agencies, the rules are invalid. And we're not getting rid of all of them, but if you've been harmed by a rule from a 3-letter agency, that's not law. If you've been harmed, you can sue now, and this is the cornerstone for your lawsuit. So Minnesota keeps on making rules, only our 4 ways of fencing. The statute doesn't say that, but they're making the rules, and the civil fines are unconstitutional as well. You can't impose a civil fine. The legislators have to say and decide all this stuff. So that Minnesota DNR says our 4 ways of fencing and only this 4 ways. So that happened in May. They're sending it out. We got it in writing, this way or the highway. Then my inspection happens on August 9th, and I asked him again on video, Bryce Volbrecht, the game warden. Yep, you can only do it those 4 ways. And if you don't, you're going to get tickets, violations, civil penalty, license revocation, and move towards killing your deer. All of them. Okay. So September 1st, it has to be up. I don't put it up. January 1st, they have to inspect by January 1st. They still haven't inspected my farm, but they went to Stan Tweet, my friends. He didn't put it up either. But I have a recording of a game warden going to a farm. I got it on my phone. Okay. The guy asks him, can I go off your 4 methods? He goes, yes, you can put up pallets and lean them on the fence and I'll approve it. Okay. So I asked the game warden, now it stands, can I put pallets up on my fence? He says, no, I can only approve the 4 methods. That's it. What if I want to put pallets up? Well, I'd have to look at it, he says. And I said, you just told me only those 4 methods. Now you're saying you'd look at pallets? What are you talking about? Oh, I'm not. He gets mad and storms out of the building. So they're lying again on video. So then I take all this stuff that I've got on video and I send it to the wardens. I do a Facebook video and I get lots of views. And I send it to 6 state senators one morning at about 8 o'clock. 3 hours later, 3 hours later, after I send it to the senators and the two game wardens, the game warden sends a notice back to Stan and says, I'm rescinding your notice of violation because you maybe misunderstood what I said to you. What he's really saying is you're too dumb to understand. And he says, if there's another method of fencing that you'd like to try to save some money, let me know and I'll see if we can approve it. Well, they're not going to approve anything, but
No.
they know they're in trouble. So I look at it like this. Here's what I think has happened, and this is kind of funny. I envision the Minnesota DNR. We could lose our hearing, we could win, but I think they've got on a really tight pair of jeans and they've peed in their pants and they're trying to get out of them. They're stuck down around their ankles. They got their butt cheeks hanging out. They want to switch into something clean and they're hopping around on one leg trying to figure out how to get out of this urine-soaked pair of jeans. They're in a heck of a mess. They're they're challenging us with rules and civil fines that are in direct contradiction to the Chevron indifference federal case. While we have a federal case going that says you violated our constitutional rights. So they're giving us more evidence towards yet another lawsuit. And they keep putting it in writing. And then they come to our farms and let us videotape them and document their lies. I've never seen such a dumb agency in my entire life.
Well, I gotta tell you, the one thing that I've heard stories similar to yours, not with the deer, but with businesses where the legislation and stuff is being used to try to put them under. And the one thing that standard procedure is the hubris, the ego of these people that they truly believe that they can't say anything and you must comply because their rule is ultimate. And they have no fear. They do now in your case, but they have no fear that you're going to do anything else but comply. And when you don't, they assume that threats will be enough.
Correct. And if you were to raise kids, let's say you're raising your kids, okay? And you told your kids, you need to clean up your room. You need to listen to me. And if you don't clean up your room, there's going to be a punishment. And then he says, well, what's the punishment going to be? I'm going to fine your cousin $5. The cousin that comes up once a year to the farm, he's paying me $5. And your kid says, I don't hardly know that kid. Go ahead, take $5 from him. I'm not cleaning my room. So what we've done with the Minnesota DNR is they don't answer to anybody. And when we sue them in federal court, it doesn't cost their pension, it
Nope.
doesn't cost their wage. They don't lose any money from their department. The taxpayers, they have to legislate the amount of the lawsuit into the next spending bill to pay their debt in the lawsuit. The DNR doesn't have to pay anything.
Nope.
So it's like finding their cousin. They don't care. We couldn't raise successful kids this way. So I thought about it long and hard, and I have a solution. And I called a friend of Donald Trump's personally, called him up. And I talked to Scott Jensen a year ago, and I'm going to keep pushing for this and pushing for it and pushing for it. I'll tell you what the solution is in Minnesota. Okay. Minnesota DNR right now are weaponized. There might be some
Yes.
there might be some patriots in the group. There might be. But for the most part, we get a hard left leaning governor like Tim Walz, and they're weaponized. They can't do anything. They're going to lose their job. But they took an oath to uphold the Constitution, but they throw it out the window because they want to get their pension. They don't care if they harm people. Okay, what's the solution? There's no accountability. They're easily weaponized. Here's the solution. I told Scott Jensen this. I did a fundraiser for him back when he ran last time. I had 30 farmers in the room. They were all livid. Every farmer was livid. But they weren't deer farmers. They were
Yep.
corn farmers, beet farmers, cattle farmers. They were all livid at the Minnesota DNR. They each had horror stories of how the DNR was treating their agricultural pursuit, and it was not deer. It was legitimate acts of agriculture, okay? We get done, and Scott says, Steve, good presentation. I'm glad to hear all these problems. What's the solution? I said, I have the solution. When you become governor, I want you to pass an executive order, pass into law, have your attorney general draft it up. We have a crisis in Minnesota. Walsh let the precinct burn. We're about 2,000 officers short from the sheriff, state patrol, police departments. We're 2,000 officers down. The response time to 911 is at an all-time high. You can't hardly get a cop. Big city crime is rampant. And we have 200 wardens in the state who don't hardly have any calls whatsoever. They work hard at certain times of the year, but in the winter they don't have. They're highly trained, making big money, well equipped, and they look good and they're probably highly intelligent, but they don't have enough to do. I said, you need to pass a law that these 200 game wardens would, in fact, immediately report to their local sheriff. We would get rid of the game warden position. If you have a gun on your hip and powers of arrest, you report to your sheriff. There will be a new position called a conservation deputy. The sheriff answers for the game warden. The sheriff responds to and investigates all wildlife calls. And we abolish, there is no more green uniformed game wardens running around in the state. The state would write the sheriff a check for whatever it costs. Pick a number, 150 grand a year. The state writes the sheriff a check for $150,000 a year, and the state has the game warden, now a conservation deputy, and the conservation deputy gets to work on meth labs, sexual assaults, roadkill deer, maybe do a rough grouse survey, hear how many times they beat in the morning, one time when they get up, report, fill out that paperwork. And they work on shining cases, trespassing cases, but then it's a lull in activity and they get to go work on a meth lab case. And the sheriff has well-rounded employees. They're handling all the wildlife calls. But the beauty of it is we've now removed the weaponization of the DNR, because if people have a problem with the local conservation deputy, they get to go talk to their locally elected sheriff.
Who has some skin in the game.
He has some skin in the game. And so Scott Jensen didn't win, but he was entertained by the idea. Jim Schultz ran for attorney general. He liked the idea. I've spoke to many Republican senators, many, since then about this idea. They all like it. You game wardens watching this video, listen up. You guys took an oath. You don't care about your oath. You're about to lose it all. Because if Minnesota ever goes red, they're not going to let 200 officers sit around and do virtually nothing. The highlight of their fall is to harass some old grandpa who put out a bucket of corn. And
Yep.
you get to ding him and take his deer and his rifle and let him hunt for 3 years. Meanwhile, people's houses are being broken into. People are being robbed, fentanyl, sexual assaults, carjackings, and you guys don't even show up to anything. You guys are about to lose it all. You had it too good for too long, and you need to be reined in, and you need to be accountable to a locally elected sheriff who says, not on my watch. That's the way it needs to be. We need all hands on deck.
Yes, we do.
We can't have 2,000 officers short in the state of Minnesota with game wardens running around looking for a kid in the winter with expired tabs on a 1979 Arctic cat who's in 10th grade taking a snowcat to school in a
Yep.
school with 300 kids. What are we doing? This is
I know.
ridiculous. You game wardens are ridiculous. So most of you are. And the reason they're so poor is because they don't spend any time in court. They write payable offenses and they don't have enough to do. So they try to say, look at me, I'm writing tickets to justify my wage, but you're writing tickets that don't matter to anybody. And you're hyper zealous in going after people, violating
Gosh,
constitutional rights.
my father-in-law used to call the DNR damn near Russia.
Yep.
And it's very scary to me because when you were talking about the bird flu and stuff, when I was listening to you talk about your story and when I did my research on this, I said, this is the test case for
Yep.
what is going to happen to the small turkey farmers, the small chicken people, and it's going to move its way into the beef and the pork industry. The small little producers are going to be taken out. Their land, their produce and stuff is going to be confiscated. The big boys will move in and will have nothing but corporate farms, corporate rules, corporate prices.
Right.
And that's what's going to be left. You guys are the testing ground. You're the battlefield. But most of the farmers and the ranchers can't see it yet. But they're practicing on you.
Right. And guess what? People say, well, it's just a deer farmer. It doesn't impact
No.
me. It's no big deal. But let me just say something. Our lawsuit, we asked for an injunction to stop the loss. We're going to get an answer. But we're going to set a precedent either way. It's going to be a
Yes.
precedent that's going to have ripples all across the United States. It's either going to be a really good precedent or it's going to be a really bad precedent. And if we lose, that means that it's fair game for the Minnesota DNR
Yes.
to start controlling turkeys and cattle and everything. And
Yes.
so it's real interesting too because there's a switch that goes on. People say we got a wolf problem in Minnesota, and we do, and they're killing all the deer. And I did 20 talks last winter. My kids started a club called Hunters for Hunters. Check it out online, Hunters for Hunters. If you're interested in creating a voice for Minnesota sportsmen, pet owners, landowners, livestock producers, we want to be that voice. And we're a brand new club. We're starting. We got good membership enrollment. Check it out. It's $35 a year. And we need to create a voice that will stand up and speak up for what's right. Okay, so now these wolves are causing a problem. They're killing cattle, killing pets. It's just a regular onslaught. We had guys telling us that um, I'm 60 years old. We used to see 30 deer a weekend with me and my kids, everybody here. Now we haven't seen a deer in 6 years. My granddaughter doesn't want to hunt. She doesn't like sitting out in the cold and never seeing a deer. We don't see a deer track. The deer are gone. And I'm gonna make my point. People say, well, the DNR is really inept to let this happen. No, no, the
No, they're
DNR is
not.
not inept. We asked Sarah Stroman at the DNR for an official position statement stating that the Minnesota DNR is ready for wolves to be delisted from federal protection and the state assumes management responsibility. Sarah Stroman said, we will not make that statement. So they're hiding behind federal protection. They don't want wolves to be delisted because they're in bed with the wolf lovers. Okay,
Yes.
so so are they making a huge mistake by not managing wolves? No, they're not. They know exactly what they're doing. In the far left utopian dream, there's a balance between wolves and deer, and there's no room for hunters. There's no room for gun ownership. There's no room for land ownership. There's no room for any of this stuff. The balance needs to be in nature, and hunters are just in the way. That's I honestly believe that. I believe it.
Believe it too. The problem is that's like most leftist dreams, panacea. It's never going to occur. What the problem is you're going to end up with overpopulation, one point or another. You're going to end up with things like chronic wasting. You're going to end up with mange, distemper, and other things going through populations. Hunting serves a purpose.
Right, right. So my point is Trump is going to get wolves delisted. It passed through the congressional House hearing at the federal level last year to get wolves delisted in the lower 48 states. The Democrats stopped it, but now Trump has the House. He has all branches of government. Wolves are going to get delisted legislatively. It's going to be law. It's going to be a good deal. That's going to happen in September. Minnesota still doesn't want to have a wolf season, anything meaningful. It's probably not going to happen. But under state management, no longer under federal protection right now, you can only shoot a wolf if it's attacking a person. If it's eating your horse, you just got to watch it and call somebody. Okay. But under state management, you will then be able to shoot a wolf if it's threatening your pet, livestock, property. You can shoot it and turn it into the state and say, come get your doggone wolf off my land. So it's going to be a good thing to get them delisted. People will be empowered. We have a problem. Elections
Huge.
have consequences. And if you're living up here in the rural area and we're a blue state, we got a problem. Keep voting this way, and industry will be under attack, small businesses under attack, your way of life,
Yes.
the rural area is going to disappear.
They don't want us out here. They
No.
want us clustered in large apartment complexes in the cities where we will be within walking distance of everything we need, where they will keep us safe, and where basically we're going to be very well kept prisoners.
So you said that you saw a video of mine on rocks and cows, and that
Yes.
the name for that rocks and cows Facebook site came from Walt's Hot Mike talking about people north of the cities and rural Minnesota. He said, there's nothing up there but rocks and cows. We don't matter. We don't matter.
Yes.
Yeah. So let's just say this. Uh, for me, my fight to keep my farm, I don't care. I don't care. I'm reckless. If I lose my farm, so be it. I have a retirement. But my friends in the lawsuit have nothing. I want to
Dan.
win. I want to win. But I'm kind of anxious because I want to see what happens under the statute. If our attorneys all died in a plane crash and our lawsuit went up in flames and we had nothing left, I want to see what it's going to look like for these game wardens to come with a court order and 20 black SUVs and assault rifles to say we're here to shoot your 200 deer. I'm looking forward to it. I think that's going to be a hoot. Now, I don't think that's going to happen because we have a lawsuit and things are going in the right direction. But I'm just saying they better not. I don't know where that ends. Now, I can't be violent. I won't be violent. I'm a law-abiding guy. But I'm just curious how it would go to show up at my farm to kill all my deer to say he didn't put up a fence. He doesn't care about disease. He's in a USDA certified herd. He doesn't have CWD. He's selling doe urine legally all over the country. They're pouring it all over in the woods. We're not worried about that. We're not worried about the water washing in and out of his pens. But we made him put up a $200,000 fence. He won't do it, so they can't touch noses. So we're here to shoot him. But the water running in and out of his pens, yeah, we're not worried about that.
Remember, we're talking about the government that made people walk up and down grocery aisles with arrows,
Right.
wear little paper masks, and stand 6 feet away from each other to solve another crisis that they started.
Right.
They're very good at starting crises like this
Yeah.
and then following them right off the cliff and trying to take us with. So I am so happy that you're fighting back. Now, just we're almost out of time, but do you think there's any way that those people that did lose everything are going to be able to come back for reparations if you win? And
Yes.
reparations is not a word I like, but
No. So what I understand is this is my own thought process. Nobody's told me this. I don't understand the whole procedure, but I'm gonna tell you what I think, okay?
okay.
I think if the judge rules and he says, yep, injunction, laws were unconstitutional, get rid of these laws. If that ruling comes forward, I believe that will be the cornerstone. So now we get to say, well, it was unconstitutional. Here's the federal court ruling. Now let's see who was damaged as a result. And then we line up with more lawsuits and go back in and look for damages. And the cornerstone of those financial damages lawsuits for people who killed off all their animals and left the business and sold their house and moved out of state, I think that's a pretty big deal. Our attorney just represented 150 doctors and nurses at Mayo Clinic who refused to take the jab,
Good for them.
and he won. And so now there's 100. He won against Mayo Clinic, all their power, all their might, all their legal experts. Our attorney won, and now there's 150 wrongful termination suits. You can't fire someone for not taking fetal stem cell material into their bloodstream, but
Poison.
they got fired anyway. And so now wrongful termination means they're going to get any lost wages, expenses, and looking for new jobs, any difference in healthcare, retirement, stock. If you were working as a doctor for $300 an hour and you had to go get a job for $50 an hour, you get all lost income for the whole time you were unemployed until you get back up to your $300 an hour. Mayo Clinic's on the hook for all of it. And so those lawsuits, I think, are all starting, and each one's going to have a different damages claim. In Minnesota, I don't know what they're going to do. If we win, what are they going to do? Just say, well, oops, we're sorry. It's
I
not
just
over.
wish I just wish it wouldn't come down to tax dollars because they're already 5.7 billion, planning a 5.7 billion dollar deficit. I wish like what your idea was that this would have a bigger impact on them than giving them our money.
Right. So and again, if you were going to punish your kid by taking $5 from your cousin, his cousin that he never sees,
Yep.
well, the DNR didn't learn anything. The only solution to what I'm telling you is go Trump, go Trump, go Trump. But The Minnesota DNR is easily weaponized when we get a left-leaning waltz. They need to be neutered, and the only way to do it is to turn them over to the local sheriff. I called a friend of mine who's a personal friend of Donald Trump, and I suggested Donald Trump do this. He said, I don't know how he could legally do it. I said, we're about to be at war. Israel's going to take out Iran's nuclear reactors. I fully
Yes.
suspect we're going to have something going on American soil. And as soon as we're at war, he could sign an executive order that says all of these game wardens, we need all oars in the water. Go report to your local sheriff immediately. And you're working on deporting and finding illegals to ship out that are possible terrorists amongst them. And I said it could happen with executive power as soon as we're at war. And I think we're going to be. I think we're going to be at war. We don't know anything about the drones going on. And when Iran goes after Israel goes after Iran's nuclear reactors, I suspect it'll happen within 30 days of Trump taking office or sooner. I think people will be acting up on American soil. I don't know that for sure, but I kind of suspect something's going to happen. And when that happens, Trump's going to have lots of authority. And guess who's going to be the first person responding to possible if there's terrorism on American soil? You know who's going to be showing up? It's not going to be the National Guard. It's not going to be the military. It's going to be your local law enforcement.
Yep.
They're the ones showing up. And if they're the ones that are going to be showing up, then we don't need a game warden hiding out in the woods waiting for a grandpa to use a bucket of corn to shoot a deer. We need that game warden with his bulletproof vest and all his wits and training and his assault rifle to be looking for bad guys. That's what we need. So
Totally on the same page.
I
Totally on
think
the
some,
same page.
I think something's going to happen, and I think it's going to be every day after Trump's in office. I'm going to wake up and want to watch the news. And I'll say
They're
this
going to
as we
have
close.
to.
Let me say this in closing.
Okay.
I'm a Christian man. I believe God put me here for a reason. That's what I believe, okay? And I don't
Absolutely.
however big or however small my plan was, I don't know. Okay? I tried to raise my boys and do a good job. But to sit and watch all this stuff unfold, it's incredible. And I was scrolling through Facebook, okay? I was scrolling through Facebook before I took your Zoom call here, and a lady posted something. And it was something about her wanting to run for office, and she got criticism from some people in her church for you shouldn't be involved in politics. So I want to say this. We need to be vocal. We need to
Yes.
stand up. Our country's being stolen from us. I'll do every interview all the time, every day, because we need to talk. Christian men and women have been asleep at the wheel, sitting at their hands, saying, I don't want to get involved. I don't want to say anything online. You need to say something. You need to get involved. You need to be vocal. You need to vote. But you need to say if something's wrong, say it's wrong. If something's right, say it's right. But we
And
can't
stick to it.
but we can't be silent anymore.
No.
We got to get involved. Okay.
Well,
So Trump's in charge, and I think it's going to be a fun year to watch and see what happens. I hope he survives.
well, that's why I do this podcast because I also am on the same page you are. I don't think it's going to be smooth sailing. I think that there's a lot more planned for us, and I think it's going to test a lot of people's mettle. And I appreciate people like you who stand up and don't just quietly, as I always get criticized for saying this, but don't just quietly get into the railroad cars for their trip to the spa
Right.
and let the cards unfold. I'm the type of person that is Bruce and I have talked about it. We said, well, if we go down, we're going down fighting
Right. Right.
because I want my life to have meant something.
Right. I'm just enjoying the ride, you guys. You can't imagine the legal trouble and fights that I had in law enforcement. I could talk to you for 10 hours. This fight with the DNR, it's comical because collectively, I'm sorry, you game wardens watching, they're about the dumbest group of guys I've ever met in my entire life. They're dumb when it comes to the law. There's no way that they should have been sending those emails that were subject to a data request that I can get my hands on. Dumb guys, okay? And so now all of a sudden there's going to be more fun things happening, and I get to sit back and use the law that they created against them. This is awesome.
Well,
Let's
here's the
just
thing.
watch it unfold. Stay tuned, everybody.
That's what I
I'm
was just
hoping
going to
we
say
win.
is I would like you to do me a favor. I would like you to get back in touch with me when your lawsuit,
Sure.
whichever version it is.
Yeah.
And because I think I know you fairly well. I don't know you at all, but just from this little bit of time together, whichever way the chips fall, you're not out of this.
I'm not out of this. So there's two options. We get an injunction and all the laws are repealed, and then we look at damages, or we lose and the DNR says we're coming to shoot all your deer. Heck, I like both options. Both options are phenomenal. Let's get 20 guys in black SUVs with flak jackets walking around my property shooting my deer. I think that'd be fantastic. I can't wait. I don't want it to happen, but I'm just saying
Understand?
all my options are good right now because they've embarked on a path they don't want to be on. They're still trying to get out of the urine soaked skinny jeans that they're wearing. They're trying to get them off their ankles. They don't know how to do it.
Well, Steve, please keep in touch because I know this story isn't anywhere near over with. And
All right.
as it begins to unfold, I want to know more. And thank you so much for your time, dear. I appreciate it so
All right.
much.
Send me a link when you get it online.
I will do that. You take care.
Thank you much. Yep.
You
Bye.
bet. Bye-bye. Okay, everybody. Here's my disclaimer. And as always, God bless, take care, and stay safe. I'm going to continue to bring you as much fun news as I can. Be good.